Hi, I'm Arnie Weissmann, Editor-in-Chief of Travel Weekly. Travel Weekly's objective is to provide people within the travel industry with the information, the critical information they need to make the best business decisions. And we do this through a print publication, through a website, through face-to-face events, digital products, and other media. So although our audience is primarily North American, we actually also have Travel Weekly Asia, Travel Weekly China editions that are focused just on those markets. So the travel industry is a very complex industry with lots of different vertical segments. There's hospitality, there's aviation, cruise, tour operators, technology, retail travel agents, digital travel agents. And they all interact in different ways. There's a lot that they can learn from one another. When I think about the standards that everyone can learn from, actually hospitality is the one area that I think is the one that is most critical that the others can learn from. And a lot of that has to do with guest satisfaction. So when you look at, for instance, the cruise industry, they have on every ship a hotel manager. And this person is trained usually in all of the elements of hospitality that one typically thinks about with hotels. But if you're looking at what a traveler's experience is from the moment they leave their house until the moment they arrive back home, I'm guessing that their best experience is likely to be at the hotel. And I think that other parts of the industry make it's difficult to live up to those standards that a good hotel provides. For instance, for most cruise lines, at the end of the cruise, they might have had a fantastic experience. Getting off a cruise ship is often the beginning, you really know your vacation is over. You're often sitting in a lounge waiting for the time that you can get off the ship. A lot of this is beyond the cruise line's control, by the way. It has to do with immigrations and customs and just the operations of getting thousands of people on or off a ship. But still, I think that there are things that people throughout the industry, and I'm seeing it more in aviation. It used to be a lot in aviation, and I think we're kind of coming full circle now that the airlines are getting financially healthier again, where you see that the customer, or in this case the passenger experience, is improving. And it does vary from airline to airline, but I think the airlines that pay the most attention to that are the ones that are going to actually be the most successful in the long term. My business is media, and the question is what, if anything, can hospitality learn from media in terms of loyalty and engagement? And the one word that I would look at as being critical to both industries would be trust. I mean, trust is all that Travel Weekly has. Trust is all that any media outlet has. If you lose that, you've lost 100% of your value. So where it becomes really interesting, I think, for me, trying to compare media and hospitality is that we deal with, to a large extent, factual information. We look at news, we look at information that's relevant, we want to get quotes correct. So if we have customer dissatisfaction, if we have somebody saying to us, well, you're wrong, for us it's, I don't know that it's always so easy, but it is a fairly clear-cut matter to say, well, let's check on that. I mean, one time somebody was very upset with me because we had said that the capital of the Netherlands is Amsterdam. It is the capital, but the legislative bodies all are in The Hague. So they were saying, you got it wrong, it's The Hague. So we said, well, let's just look that up and see. And the answer was that it was, yes, Amsterdam. So with hotels, if a customer comes in and says, and complains and has all these long lists of complaints, there's a lot more subjective often, what really happened, how it happened. And a hotelier doesn't want to be in a position of saying, well, I'm right and you're wrong. Not that we in media, are looking to say I'm right and you're wrong, but it's a more difficult and delicate balance when it comes to customer satisfaction. So I think ultimately, though, it does rely on trust, and that's the foundation. That if in fact there's a customer dissatisfaction, a hotel's brand, whether it's part of a large chain or if it's a single hotel, the trust that they build up, and that starts from the check-in process, it starts with the ability to deliver on the promises of the hotel and of the brand. If that trust is being built from the moment that the guest walks into the hotel, then it is easier, if there should be a problem or a dispute, to solve it in a way that is going to be amicable. The company, for us to create value and variety, is a relatively straightforward thing because we aren't necessarily reactive. We look for trends, we look for things that are happening. We're not just reacting to press releases or the news of the moment. But the news of the moment does provide a lot of change and a lot of significance. Hotels, in terms of adding variety and value, it's a bit more difficult. You can't do a complete renovation every day, every year, every couple of years in many cases. The model, the economic model and structure is very different. But I think what it gets down to is, for both of us, is do you follow your customers or do you lead your customers? I think this is the heart of a lot of businesses that want to have some variety and add some value and differentiate themselves. And you can sort of make cases in either direction in terms of people do tremendous, extensive surveying of their guests and of their customers and want to find out what is it that they want and then provide that. But I think there's a lot of value in not simply following your customers, in my case, following my readers. Henry Ford had a great quote, and he said, if I had just followed what my customers wanted, if I asked them, what do you want? They would have said, faster horses. And clearly, that's coming up with a car was not going to be in the pursuit of making faster horses. In hospitality, there's actually a much more specific and interesting example, and that has to do with the creation of the Westin Heavenly Bed. So for years, whenever hoteliers would survey customers, they put, what's important to you, the bed would come in below 10th place. But some very brave marketer at Starwood said, you know what, even though customers aren't asking for the bed, I think the bed is central to the experience, and if we put a lot of focus in marketing on the Heavenly Bed at Westin, I think we're going to really have a winner. And they decided to do that, even though that wasn't what the data was telling them that their customers were wanting. And a very interesting thing happened. Not only was that a hugely successful campaign, but every other hotel company, every other major brand followed them and started improving their beds and getting further along the line. And what that strategy in marketing would be called would be a lighthouse strategy, where you're calling people to you rather than you just simply following them. And I think that's really a critical point in value creation. So in looking at media, what are the principles of a core story that really gets people motivated, that keeps people engaged, that gets people wanting to act on whatever it is that they're reading about? And how would that relate, for instance, to hospitality? So I got some really good advice when I was in college from, I was a visiting writing instructor. And she said that the reader has no obligation to go from one sentence to the next unless you give them that motivation, that incentive. In other words, every sentence has to be so good that it keeps the reader reading, because there's no shortage of things to pick up and read or websites to go on to read. So it's I think, parallel in hospitality is the type of attention to detail that keeps people engaged in a hotel. So it starts again from the moment that someone pulls up to the curb. There has to be something in there that is engaging. They walk through the door. There's things that are engaging, and when they walk through the door for the fourth time, they've been out in the city, coming back and forth, or out on excursions, that there's always enough things that are interesting. And it could very well be with the design, and it doesn't mean that it has to be a heavily detailed, rich design with lots of things, but even spare design has elements that are arresting, and that when you come in, you just sort of see things fresh and see things anew. When you go to the restaurant, when you go to the room, there's just sort of engagement and surprises almost everywhere you go along, and I think that's critical for a really great hotel. So when it comes to communications, and this is something that obviously in media we're engaged in all the time, and when it comes to hospitality, there's internal communications, there's external communications, then there's the third-party communications that are written about what it is that you're doing. And I think the biggest change in this generation is the loss of control of messages, that you no longer are the sole entity that defines your brand, right? This is not particularly news to people that there are other people who have a voice in it. But I think that a key thing and an advantage, in a way, to this loss of control is that it can bring you into communities that you didn't even know existed. If you yourself are targeted, because there's so much in terms of marketing that's very targeted, you want to get your message out to the people you think are the ones who are going to be most interested in your brand. But if you look at Twitter, and this is, I think, one of the best things about Twitter, is that you have people who follow you. Those are the people who are going to feel an affinity for you. They're the ones who are attracted to you. They decide to follow you. They themselves have followers. They themselves participate in communities that you may not have even known existed. And when they retweet a message that you've sent, or they tweet a message about you, you're actually reaching out broadly. So that has some implications, because the message that you're sending, you've got to realize that when you tweet, when you send any sort of message, when you put anything that can be cut and pasted and sent out to somebody else, you've got to recognize that it's not going to go out to an audience that is quite as targeted as perhaps your marketing department told you it was. I'm a correspondent on a television show called The Travel Detective, and the Travel Detective's objective is to make travelers smarter travelers. And we do that by focusing in on things that both travelers are doing and that suppliers are doing, that the airlines, hotel companies, cruise lines are doing that the traveler may not know about, that when they do know about it, it will help them make better decisions. For instance, I did a section once about how cruise lines are targeting solo travelers, whereas before, if a solo traveler wanted to take a cruise, they had to actually pay for, if they wanted to be by themselves in one room, they had to pay for the empty bed. So that was really not a very inviting proposition, and there was a large group of single people who wanted to cruise, and maybe it was a case of families going along and excuse me, they want to invite their aunt who isn't married to come along, or someone else who's single. And so Norwegian Cruise Line was really the first one to do it, and they devoted a series of inside cabins which tend to be not very desirable. But what they did was they made them they were so well designed that it was not a bad experience. It was small, it didn't feel claustrophobic, and they also built things around it. They built a bar that was a kind of a little meeting area that was especially for the solo travelers. They had, just after sailing day, they asked everyone to come and have a meeting, get to know one another. So the show looks for those sorts of things that can be very useful and helpful to people who are traveling in any form. So technology is changing very quickly in lots of areas, and in hospitality, if there were a rule of thumb, if there was a guideline that I think is really important in terms of evaluating new technology, because technology is expensive, it takes a long time to install. Once you get it in there, it can start looking old quickly. The things that I would look at if I were running a hotel are what are the things that are going to simultaneously improve the customer experience and save me money, and throw it in and make me money. So one of the technologies I think is very promising for hotels is the radio frequency ID, RFID technology. And if you look, the company I think that is making the best use of that would be Disney. And they're using it in their parks, and they're doing it in ways that do exactly what I said. It is improving the customer experience, it is saving them money, and it is making them money. And so if you are going to get a My Magic band, so you have to be staying in one of their resorts. So first of all, they're giving an incentive, yet one more incentive for people to stay in their hotels rather than third-party hotels in the Disney parks. So you sign up online and you pay to get a wristband. The wristband, you load all sorts of information on it. You can load your credit card information on it if you want. And first of all, when you go into the park, instead of having to get a ticket out, hand it to someone, they tear it, they give it back to you, you just kind of hold your wrist up and you're in. So it improves park flow, not only for the customers who have it, but for the other customers, because it takes them out of the lines. So lines become shorter. And it also allows you to sign up for the fast lane attractions, and again, it just improves the flow through. And when you get to the gift shop that you inevitably have to walk through at the end of every ride, you can actually make your purchases through with your RFID, so that speeds up the process there. So it's kind of win-win-win all the way around. I can see that hotels could use this to their advantage in lots of ways. So it's a great trend for wellness, spa, even medical tourism. This is a huge trend we're seeing. We did a cover story on this not too long ago. And what's interesting is I think at this point, it's not even a question if you're, let's say, you're a travel agent or you're a hotel that's offering something. It's not like you have to sell it. I think people already have in mind that they know what it is. You don't have to sort of explain it. And the question becomes, to what extent or what percentage of your vacation do you want to be devoted to wellness? And I think part of it depends on why someone is traveling, of course. So, you know, there's medical tourism where people will go specifically to get plastic surgery or even a cancer treatment. And they'll do it in another country for different reasons. For instance, it could be economic. Thailand, I know, has devoted a lot of government money to upgrade their medical facilities for the purpose of medical tourism. And so you can get treatments from very well-trained doctors that are just simply going to cost less than it would cost in the US. South Africa is doing a really interesting thing. There's a lot of plastic surgery tours because, let's say you want to get a nose job and you know that after you get it you're going to have big bruises and you're going to have to explain to everybody why are you wearing bandages all over your face, why are your eyes so puffy? Well, if you're with a group of other people who all got nose jobs, you go off on a safari, you're all together, you go on the 1 or 2 week safari, your face recovers and you just return more beautiful and nobody quite knows why. Or if you're just a business traveler and you want to, you know, business travel can be very stressful. You're often don't have much time. Sometimes, I know I went to South Korea last year. I never left the hotel. I was there for 2 or 3 days, and it's just meetings and business and not much fun. But on the other hand, a spa treatment, you know, a massage scheduled in, I wish I had thought of that ahead of time, because when I went to actually look at what hour I did have where I could kind of squeeze it in, the spa was already full. So these are the type of things that it's really also the way, if somebody's on your website, if they're looking through a travel agency, being aware of this, having a strategy for each type of traveler, for what they might want to do in the spa, what type of, if you can get some demographic information about them and you know what people like them tend to want, you make an attractive offer during the booking process, then you're ahead of the game. Travel industry in general, probably retail travel maybe feels it the most, does face a recruitment challenge in ways that they didn't before. There's probably a couple of different reasons for it. So today, young people have much more opportunities to travel than they have probably any other time in history, in human history. So 30 years ago, if you wanted to see the world, you would probably be attracted to the travel industry for the opportunities, maybe as a flight attendant, maybe as a travel agent with the opportunity to travel, maybe as a hotelier with the possibility of assignments in different locations. Today, with globalization, there's any number of careers that someone can pursue to see, and also as a side benefit, get to see the world. So that's one of the keenest and key incentives that used to be a great recruitment tool for the travel industry in all of its different phases, is now eroded somewhat. Now the upside is that if somebody is going to pursue a degree, a career in the travel industry, it's probably because they are especially passionate about travel. And if you're going to be in hospitality, I think that attracts people who are interested in that whole experience. And the other thing that's positive is that I know my children have traveled a lot more trips to further destinations than I did when I was at their ages, and they have exposure to hotels that I certainly wouldn't have had to. And that very experience of traveling younger can be very inspirational. And I think we're going to see a really interesting generation coming up of people who have had a great deal of travel experience and are then going to pursue that passion as a career.